Giva Corja. Hi there, everybody. Eimear Burke here. Welcome to another Fireside Chat. And this is Fireside Chat 122. So, as is customary, I will start with a prayer for peace. Gamara Shiakon na fud na crinne. Gamara Shiakon in our Jaili agus in our Jirha. Gunairi Lin, Lenar Kuj Garmaka, Gamij Boikas Jiv, Jeh Quiftaka, the Spirit Quiftaka. May peace prevail on earth. May peace prevail in our homes and in our countries. May our missions be accomplished. We thank you, guardian spirits and guardian deities. For peace. As the fever of day calms towards twilight, may all that is strained in us come to ease. We pray for all those who suffered violence today. May an unexpected serenity surprise them. For those who risk their lives each day for peace, may their hearts glimpse providence at the heart of history. That those who make riches from violence and war might hear in their dreams the cries of the lost. That we might see through our fear of each other a new vision to heal our fatal attraction to aggression. That those who enjoy the privilege of peace might not forget their tormented brothers and sisters. That the wolf might lie down with the lamb, that our swords be beaten into plowshares, and no hurt or harm be done anywhere along the holy mountain, with thanks to John O'Donoghue. So let me see where you're all from today. Hi from Ohio, Cumbria. Hi, Harriet, Belgium. Hello there from my soggy bit of Hertfordshire. The birds and plants are loving the rain. Minnesota, Scotland, Killarney, Edinburgh, windswept Brighton, Crouch End, Northamptonshire. Just lovely to see you all. Quebec, lovely. Ulster, Cornwall, South Wales, Wyoming, Washington, Edinburgh, Wyoming again, Madrid, Wales, wait a second, where are we? New York, beautiful, Worcestershire, Richmond, Virginia, Washington State, Berlin, Des Moines in Iowa, Cheshire. Wonderful to see you all. Well, we're going to Berkshire. So we're going to Spain this evening to my guest this evening, who is Jennifer Ramsey. You're so welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you very much. And I'm really honored to be here. I really am.
And judging by your accent, you're not Spanish. You are from where?
No. I'm from Scotland. But I have been living here for a long time in Spain. I make my living mostly from storytelling, normally storytelling in English. And I'm also a Gestalt therapist, specialized in art therapy, ecotherapy, and psychodrama. And I love mixing it all together and making a kind of story medicine. So that's a very quick summary of what I do.
A fellow Scot, Ferdy at McGowan, says Scots get everywhere. So what brought you to Spain?
Well, basically love. I met my husband husband-to-be when I was in Scotland for a week. It was all an accident. I was doing some Spanish dancing in a bar in Edinburgh, and he said to me in Spanish, "Oh, are you from Seville?" And I said, "No, Glasgow." And it took off from there. And it was just really meant to be a year, and I'm still here.
Wonderful one. And is your husband Spanish?
He's Spanish, yeah.
Great. So just now that you're here, because we met on the Building Resilient for Hard Time listening circle, and sorry, I'm going to get emotional now. We just got sad news today that one of our volunteers on our listening circle, Livia Statler, passed suddenly yesterday, and she was my fireside guest in March. It's Fireside Chat 109 if anybody would want to watch it. So it's been a shock, and I know that's how we met, you and I, Jennifer, and I see Ricky here as a volunteer, and Harriet, and hi to both of you as well. Hugs back, Ricky. I just wanted to honour Livia. She was very soft-spoken, very quiet, but very strong, holder of space, a great listener, very talented. She would lead us in our, she'd write out meditations for us to do at the listening circle. So I just wanted to honor her and just to mention her this evening. And we say in Irish, "Er yesh najeha gurawa hanam," at the right hand sides of the gods and goddesses, may our soul lie and rest. So Ricky says her guided meditations were awesome. Absolutely. Yeah, she was wonderful. So I just wanted to name that. Yeah. And Ferdiet says, "What a terrible shock. I remember your fireside chat together. May she be remembered with love and honor." Yeah. So anyway, I just wanted to say that, so that she's there. She's there with us, and I have a candle lighting, and I know, Jennifer, you have a candle as well lighting. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, perhaps she's here with us now, who knows. But thank you for bringing here. Yeah.
And I know I'm seeing from, what a wonderful woman, may she rest in blessed peace. That's from Jules. There are a number of people here who are on the listening circle who have known her as well. And so it's nice that we're here just to say it. Yeah. Just to be here.
It is actually, I think, because my mum died sort of at the end of September, some years ago. And I actually thought it was actually quite a nice time of the year to die, because like the leaves are falling off the trees and we are going into that darker time. And I just remember it just seemed a strange thing to say, but I just thought, yeah, I'd quite like to die when the leaves are falling off the tree. So
yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And I actually do, as a storyteller, I do work a lot with stories around death because there is a big taboo in our society. And I think through stories, it opens up this like a portal just to be able to talk in a natural way. And I actually do story death cafes. And I just invite people along, and just for 2 hours, I'll have a cup of tea, some biscuits there, and I'll bring a story. And through that story, all of a sudden, we start talking about death. And it's really surprising what comes up. Some people come along and, they've had experiences of accompanying people on the transition. And there's people come along and they're terrified. They don't know what's going to happen. And then all of a sudden, there we are, just talking in the most natural way. So I know there's death cafes out there, but I like story death cafes. I just feel it just gives me something to hang on to. And I mean, I really truly believe in the power of stories, and I know you do. And I just think, the stories that have been with us since like the beginning of humanity, they've been with us through war, through plagues, through deaths and bereavements, and they're here to help us, aren't they? So
I don't think there's any culture that doesn't have storytelling. Do you have a story you'd like to tell us?
Well, I've got lots of story I could tell you. I mean, there's a tiny 2-minute one about death I could tell you, and then later I could tell another one if that's the space. I'm just thinking about this is a story from, how do you say it in English, Cameroon in Africa.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of the Spanish pronunciation. And basically, they say there was just these two old ladies walking along a country road one day, and they were thirsty. And just up above, there was a well, and there was a man at the well. And as they approached, he was waiting there with a bowl of water. And he said, "Oh, who's the oldest?" "Well," one of the ladies says, "I should tell you that I'm life. Of course I'm the oldest." And the other one said, "Excuse me, I'm death. I'm the oldest." And life, that's impossible. There's nothing before life. And Death said, but yeah, life comes out of death. And they argued and they argued. And eventually that man said, listen, why don't you both drink out the same bowl? Because, life and death are just two sides of the same coin. And so they did. And what I don't quite understand is why life is so present. We talk about it all the time, and then death, it's only really when it happens, when you're still in shock, and all of a sudden you have to start thinking about, what is death? And so I love that. I love that tiny little story.
That's a beautiful story. I hadn't heard it before. It makes so much sense. I know Howard, my husband, died. A number of I've said this before. He died 8.5 years ago. He knew and he was prepared. But from the time we met, we talked about death and what we wanted for our funerals. We always talked about it. It shaped itself. It reshaped itself as we as we went on our journey together. So he was ready to go, and I was able to let him go because we had talked about and planned his funeral, everything. We had our ceremony out in the garden here, and because we'd always spoken about it, when the possibility of a terminal diagnosis came, we were able for it. We didn't fight it. There was no anger. It was like acceptance. We would have preferred a better outcome, but living as fully for as long as you can was what we walked in a leg of pessimism and a leg of optimism. One moderated the other. And having the death he did allowed me grieve and be grateful. So had he died during COVID, I would have had a different, my grieving story would have been very different. So being able to talk about death and have it there as part of our story, like drinking out of the same bowl, then it makes it easier. But fighting it, because you can't fight the inevitable.
You can't fight death. I actually give a course called Dancing with Death. And it's a 7-week course, and we go through the different aspects of preparing for death. Is there life after death and things like that? And what basically everyone always says, it's when you start talking about death, you can actually appreciate life more. You can really connect with life instead of just taking it for granted, and honouring life and honouring death as well, because without death, there is no life. So
that's right.
Yeah.
And we know, if we follow the year, is, from death comes rebirth.
Absolutely.
How trees are, they don't die, but the leaves die. They go into hibernation.
And I don't think the trees panic when the leaves are falling off. It's just
no, they know
nature, and from that's the fertilizer for new life, isn't it, in the spring? So yeah.
And it's making,
I didn't realize we were talking about death today. There you go.
Linda Joan, who's in Australia, and she lost her son a number of years ago, so she's no stranger to it. I think we need to embrace death a lot more than we do in society. Absolutely, Linda. And then Nicholas's amazing idea, Dancing with Death, and it's something around making death your friend, so that when death does come, you're ready.
Yeah. I might tell you another story later about Dancing with Death. If there's
lovely.
Absolutely. That might come up, but there's another. One of my favorites. Yeah.
It's hard to make death your friend, though. I know life is hard. Death is hard. There are lots of things that are hard. And I think, I know it's worked for me, so that when my husband did die, I was able. Now, I'm not too sure about a sudden death. That's a different thing, but having
time, the death of a child is very, very difficult.
So, this isn't about death being easy, but it's around, there's less fighting the inevitable, I think. Somehow it's about being able to go engage with it gracefully. And Nimi says, I'd like to say I'm ready, but hopefully not yet. That sounds It's a bit like Thomas Aquinas, Lord, make me chaste, but not yet. That's true. I'd love to say I'm ready every day. But I think, oh my God, I've loads of admin to do. I can't leave my kids to have to sort that out. But there have been times I've been on a plane where there's turbulence. And I think, oh, well, all right, I'm ready. And just let go. And then I'm still here to tell the tale. But Ferdy says, if the trees don't let go of their leaves and let them fall, they're more likely to be toppled by winter storms. So we need to know what to let go of and when. Little bits of death all through our lives. That is so beautifully put, Ferdy. Absolutely. Yeah. I think that is it, about all those little deaths throughout our lives and being able to let go. Yeah.
Absolutely. And there's some people say death is so unfair. And I think, well, is because I mean, like in life, there's people who pass their whole life and they're really sick and really ill. Other people are healthy. Some people have no money whatsoever, like really nothing. Other people have like so much, they don't know what to do with it. But death takes everyone. It doesn't look to see if you're rich or poor. I mean, that tarot card about death, it's just like everyone goes, whether you're young and beautiful, whether you've prayed your whole life. So
yeah, so you cut there. So I know you said life isn't fair. You froze a little bit, so it didn't come through. But I think life is hard and life is so unfair. And sometimes, for many people, death is a release. People who have suffered, it's that peace. Dario says, in Italy, we say sister death. In this case, I believe in hugs. Big bear hugs to whoever lost someone recently. Thank you. But it's sister death. Yeah. So, yeah, sometimes there's the ease about being death. Darren says, I think being positive about death is so important. All life is impermanent, and we must honor that truth within our bodies. May our souls go on. Yes. And Ricky, I love the paraphrasing of Death from the Sandman. You've got what everyone gets. You get a lifetime. Okay. And what is it? Jules says, I've got a mission to accomplish. And even if I don't accomplish it, I will have made a difference along the way with little things. Just a wee bit of immortality in that. Yeah. And then Taimi, who's in Finland, I think making death your friend is easier for someone who lived their life, at least for a while. But for someone young, it's rather trying up to a certain point. I agree. And also, if you've lived a full life, it's much easier. I think it's harder to let go when you have a sense of an unlived life, which puts us, it's incumbent upon us to live as fully as we can for as long as we can, to make the most of it. And however a full life is, it's different for everybody. Pat says, I'm a Dylan Thomas fan, I'm afraid. Do not go gently into that good night. We know it's inevitable, but I will go kicking and screaming with zero grace. Okay, Pat. And then Linda says, we definitely need more conversations about death. Yeah. And then Gabriella says, one could feel ready, yet worried about those left behind. Indeed. Yeah. And Harriet, I love the idea of a death story cafe. It's through remembering stories that perhaps the conversation of personal loss can be brought into the conversation. Yeah. And Darren says, my friend passed last year and it was my first experience with death. A tragic yet powerful experience that has changed my life's journey for the better. That's a lovely place to be, Darren. Lovely to hear that. Ferdiad says, how would you like to die? Who's the question for, Ferdiad? I don't know who that is for. And Liz has a question. Was it difficult to get your death story cafe going?
Well, where I live in Spain, it's difficult. I live in a little village. It's 35 kilometers from Madrid, but it's up near the mountains.
Okay.
And when I first arrived, it was quite a traditional, like it really was people in the village. But now there's a lot of families live here. There's a lot of people who work in Madrid and come up. It's more difficult because people are so busy. They've always got so much to do. Why stop and talk about death when there's so, you can do so many other things. It's because I also do climate cafes through story as well. So I sort of alternate. Sometimes people are really present, depends on the weather as well, but it's a nice day, who wants to go inside and have a cup of tea and talk about death? So that also influences.
Yeah. Now, just Liz said she'd
Yeah.
like to do something in her own community. Um, and I suppose it's like, I'm too busy living to be thinking of dying, yet being prepared for death is part of living. It's about your life review. It's about taking time to take stock of your life. And we do that, as within Druidry, is doing life reviews, going back and reflecting. That I think is really, really important. Philosophical Phoenix says, I'm not afraid of death, but I am afraid of the dying process. Not sure if that even makes sense. It makes absolute sense. What you want to do is die pain-free, die well. I was brought up as a Roman Catholic, and the nuns at school used to say we should pray for the grace of a happy death. I used to always laugh at this. I thought this was so silly.
Mm.
Until, as a nurse, I have seen people who didn't have a happy death. And I was nursing in the late 70s, early 80s, when pain management for people with cancer wasn't good. And people died in horrendous pain. And I think pain is a terrifying way to die. So, but now, there's no reason why pain can't be managed. Like Howard's pain was managed incredibly well. When he was passing, we had a lovely palliative care team here coming to the house every day. But it's about not dying in pain. I think it's the dying is the hard part rather than the actual death. Though I think it's good to have reflecting on where you might go. I remember when Howard was dying, my sister, who's a good Catholic, she used to say, now, Howard, when you're going to God, blah, 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 because, we all knew he was dying. There was no secret and we didn't have to be careful around him. And I said, are you going to God, Howard? And he says, no. No. He said, my spirit will be with the birds, the trees, the islands and the mountains.
Oh, I love it.
And I've had interesting experiences with birds since he passed. So Carmen Edlin, who's in Spain, she wants to know which village is it. She also lives in a village in the mountains north of Madrid.
It's called Hoyo de Manzanares.
I don't know if you know that, Carmen. Anyway.
Yeah, I'm always looking for people in Spain who could possibly be connected, because I really don't know anyone else who's in Spain and connected with the OBOD. I know there's a lot of people in Portugal. I know there's people all everywhere. And I think, but what about in Spain? So, yeah.
Oh, and maybe you'll be able to connect. That's great. So philosophically, was talking about pain. I worked in hospice care nursing as well. So true about pain and good versus not good death. Yeah. Darren says, Ram Dass speaks beautifully on death. He says, when we go through this transition, we find our true essence of divine awareness. All pain and hurt of being human is gone. So she lives in Guadarrama. This is Carmen.
Okay. It's quite far. Yeah. Well, an hour's drive. Yeah. I'm not at Guadarrama.
Oh my God!
The climate. Yeah.
Go on.
The climate cafes through stories are also quite similar, because it's talking about what's happening to the planet, and it's about finding resources, resilience, but being able to talk about it and feel your pain. And from there, once you feel the pain, then you're really able to talk about it. So it's just, different ways to talk about the same thing, really.
Yeah. It's but it is talking about pain, because it's acknowledging it, and by I think that's important. Ferdy says, my teaching of my Roman Catholic upbringing was that dying a slow and painful death was a blessing. Ooh, and I come across that one, Ferdy, and a chance to share in Calvary, which was a perspective that took a long time to recover from. I bet it did. I can honestly think of a good side of seeing. I can't have someone suffer. Absolutely, I can't either. I think that certainly be a personal choice for someone to share in Calvary. I can't. It would not be something for me. So Paul said, I was a nurse for 25 years and had the privilege of caring for many people who passed. Being the last person they saw or heard is an honour. It is. I used to be a nurse, Paul, and I think so. Absolutely. And then Daria says, when my grandma and my mother's father died, my enormous southern Italian family blew up and I couldn't visit the cemetery for years. He died very bad and we were all there. Then I started to listen to the voice of nature through Druidism. I learned acceptance. He would have done that. Blessings to all. Ancestors are our milestones. I'm grateful for this tea tonight. Thank you, Dario. That's lovely to hear that. Yeah.
Mm.
Anita, who's in Wexford. Death was my friend for a lot of the past 4 years. I lost my sister and my husband 4 years ago. My eldest daughter 2 years gone. My goodness. We were not afraid of death. We talked about it. We also planned the services. Certainly we all deal with it differently, but in talking about it, it becomes less fearful. I think we need to share experiences and love the idea of the cafe. Death changes us, but some positives can be found. Anita, thank you for that. That's just, that is lovely. Thank you for sharing that. And you've lost so many in such a short period of time. And to be able to carry that wisdom with you, I think is beautiful. And for people to hear that. So thank you for sharing that, Anita. And Angela says, I held both my mum and dad's hands as they passed over. I think that's beautiful. Yeah. So there's lots of, ways of, there's talking about it, preparing and being with and acknowledging the privilege of being with somebody. I've been there when babies have been born, and I've been there when people have passed, and they are both two very, very sacred, precious moments. The moment of our birth and death, and it's lovely when we can be with people who can honor our both experiences. And then Devon says, how do you start a conversation with family members who aren't eager or fear to talk about death? I think it's a really hard one because you can't force people either. Have you any words to add to that?
Well, it just depends. If someone I tried to talk to my mum about death and things, and there was just no way. So I just stopped it. But there's some cards, I'm trying to remember the name of them now, which if someone is sort of willing, then you can play a kind of card game in the family, which I've done with my family. And it's things like, for example, it's like you just maybe so you're playing cards, and one of them is like what would I like for the music at my funeral or something like that, okay? And I'll maybe put it on the table, and then the others guess. You'd like some kind of music from the world of the Druids, and that's probably the right answer. But it could be something like the importance I give to, for example, just being clean and tidy before I, looking good before I die, because it's, would I want my hair done or what, it's just something. And then it's sort of playing this game, and someone might say, oh, you definitely would like that. And I'd say, well, I actually said that's not important. And it's just a kind of way, playing a game and being able to talk about it. And I found that that's a good way. And also when I do my courses, it's, it gets people talking and it's interactive. And
so do you have these things written? You make your own cards and you have things written on them?
No, I've actually got a set of cards. I could quickly go and get them and see what they're called.
I'm going to read out some of these while you're doing that.
Okay, I'll just rush and we'll get them.
Harry says, when my dog was put down when I was 15, my dad and I took her to the vet. He tried to sell financial advice to the vet throughout it. I was so upset at his callousness. It's only now, 30 years later, as he's 80 and suffering from Parkinson's, that he's told me he was present when his first wife died of cancer, when he was 25 and she was 23. Now I understand why his pain was so great. Yeah. That's yeah. Thanks for sharing that, Harriet. That's not easy for you at 15 either, but yes, you can see why people behave the way they do.
No, it's not these ones. I'll try one more time.
Okay. So Tracy says, my lovely mentally ill Samoan friend died in the US away from most of his family. Those who were there covered his empty body with a special cloth and gifted it to me. I know he's flying now. That's lovely, Tracy. Lovely to receive that gift. And Angela says, it looks like cancer started to return now, but in my bone marrow. I'm on a watch and see what happens with the lymphoma with frequent blood tests, but I'm not afraid of dying, only of leaving my husband. That is hard, leaving the people behind, Angela, and I hope you can live as fully as you can for as long as you've left, and the two of you can make the most of your life together and do as much talking. And thank you for sharing that. It's I could say it's courageous, but I know you're obviously, you can do it. You're not afraid of dying. And I know my uncle had a cardiac arrest about 10 years before he actually died. And he told my mother this, that once he'd had that arrest, he was never afraid of dying again because of the near-death experience. And I know Adrian Rook talked about that. He's a guest, maybe 2 years ago. And he had that and had no more fear of that. It's, so have you found that? Did you find the
I've just
cards?
realised the cards I have here are in Spanish.
Oh, okay.
There are cards out there. I think there's an American set called the Go Wish cards. And then there's some in the UK, which is by, I think it's Jane Duncan. So there are cards out there. And I could send you afterwards the
Do.
references.
That would be lovely. Yeah. Wow. Okay. Amanda says, I learned the Tibetan death and dying ritual, which was useful for me to no longer fear death. I also take people through this when they are frightened of death. Very nice. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Yeah.
Okay. So, there are different ways of engaging with it. And I suppose the more head on you can be, the better you can. But yeah. Now, Ricky says, there was a lovely piece of writing I read recently that ended with, remember, grief came to you, my friend, because love came first. Love came first. That is something, I haven't heard that particular phrase, Ricky, before, but the one thing I know about my grief, that was the price I paid for the love I had. And I can say it was worth it. It's been a painful grief, but it hasn't been a bitter grief. There's been a sweetness to it, knowing that I'm paying, this is the price I pay for the love I had. And I've been really, really lucky to have had that. So anyway, so over to you again. So anything else you want?
I do other things as well, eh?
Yes. So tell us about other things.
Well, I mean, basically my life does revolve around story. I must admit, everything has story in it. Even when, just everything has a story in it. And so I've been telling stories for like 20 years. But what happened when the pandemic came along is all of a sudden everything was cancelled. I was actually in the Canary Islands. In the morning, I told to like secondary school students, and then I went for lunch and they said, oh, you have to go back to Madrid now because we're closing down all the Canary Islands. So I was just that sudden.
Wow.
So anyway, like everything was cancelled. And then what I did is, for some reason, I just decided, like, I got a Teachable school platform and I put up there like a story medicine course, one in English and one in Spanish, and it was free. And it was just to help people through those weeks. Because here in Spain, it was really tough. We weren't allowed out for something like 42 days or something. It was really tough. And so it was just one story a week to help people through. And then afterwards, I thought, well, why don't I set up a Dancing with Death course? And that became very popular. And then now I'm doing ones with a fairy tale journey. So like once a month, we work on a fairy tale. And, it's just a journey for a year and a day through fairy tales. It's just everything I seem to do. It just, no matter what I do, stories in the middle.
Wow.
So I've just realized that I really am a storyteller, a story worker, or whatever you might call it. But I feel very privileged that it's not about me, it's about the stories coming through me. And what I just find so amazing is that I can tell like a little fairy tale and it touches everyone in a different way. And so when you share how it touched you, all of a sudden you've got all these collective voices because it's in so many layers. And honestly, it's just changed my life, really. So I feel much more focused and centered now in terms of my work. It's not just entertaining people through stories. It really is, just the energy passing through.
You mentioned earlier the symbology of stories. Would you like to talk a bit about that?
Yes. Well, I should really tell a little story and then we could look at the symbology.
Sure. Yep.
Yeah, I just don't know what story to tell. I've got so many stories. Well, perhaps I should tell a fairy tale because it's these wonder tales that are deep in symbology. It's not just any story that's out there. And but there's one thing I should say, because like as a storyteller, obviously I'm much more expressive when I tell stories. But when I'm working with a fairy tale, I try and be a bit more neutral so that the fairy tale does its work on the people and it's not me feeding in the images. I do
Yeah.
find that quite difficult because I do get into the story.
Yeah.
So maybe I will. Well, shall I tell the story? There's one called the Queen Bee
Yep.
that you find in the Brother Grimm's,
Okay.
and then that would perhaps help us talk about that would help us talk about the
Okay.
symbolic language. Okay,
Brilliant.
you don't know the story, do you?
No.
It's a lovely story, but it's not well known. Okay, anyway, let's get into the world of story, and then we'll just see where it takes us. Okay, who knows? So just sit back. And we'll go into the world of story. Because a long, long time ago, in a faraway land, there were 3 sons. They were sons of a king. And one day, 2 of them went off into the world to seek their fortune. I don't actually think they got very far. And at one point, the youngest son volunteered to go and get them. Now, his name was Simpleton, and everyone just laughed at him all the time. But they said, off you go, Simpleton, let's see if you can find your brothers. And he did find his brothers. And the 3 of them started walking together. And after a short time, they could see that there was an anthill. And the elder brother said, wow, look at all the ants. Why don't we smash it up? And then we can see them all running around. And he said, no, don't do that. I won't let you harm the ants. Well, let's go. And they continued on their way. And they passed a lake and there were some ducks swimming. And the elder brother said, look at the ducks. I'm starving. Why don't we kill them and roast them for dinner? And Simpleton said, no, don't harm the ducks. I won't let you do that. And they said, okay. They continued on their way. And shortly after, they came to a tree. And on that tree, there was a massive beehive dripping with the most delicious honey. And the eldest brother said, why don't we smoke out the bees and then we can get the honey? And he said, no, leave the bees alone. If we look after the bees will look after us. Well, anyway, they just continued on their journey until eventually they could see in the distance there was a castle. But as they got nearer, they realized things were a bit strange. They couldn't hear any noise. They passed the stables and the horses were stone. They'd been turned to stone. They went into the castle. Where was it? Was everyone sleeping? And they walked round and round until eventually they came to a room and they looked through the keyhole and there was a little grey man, grey hair, a grey beard, and he was sitting at a table writing. They knocked at the door 3 times. He opened the door and showed them beds for the night. And then the next day, without talking, he took the eldest brother and showed him a big sort of like stone table. And on that table was written, to break the spell of the castle, you have to pass the 3 tests. And then you can marry the princess. Well, he looked at the first test. You have to find in the moss 1,000 pearls from the youngest princess's necklace. So there he was. He started looking in the moss. He looked and looked and looked and looked and looked. He had till sunset to do it. But as the sun was going down, he had 100 pearls. And he was turned to stone. The next day, the second brother came. He went to look for the pearls. He found almost 200. The sun was going down, turned to stone. And then it was the turn of Simpleton. He looked and he looked, and it was pointless. There's no way he was going to find those pearls. So he sat down on a stone and he started to cry. And as he was crying, he could see that the queen ant was there. And she said to him, "Simpleton, we'll get the pearls for you." And she did. All of a sudden, all the ants got the 1,000 pearls. He had passed the first test. The second test: find the key in the lake. It's the key to the princess's chamber. The lake was enormous. It was deep. How was he going to find a key? And all of a sudden, there were the ducks. They dived in and brought him the key. The third test: he was to use the key, go into the chamber, the bedchamber of the princesses, and he would find 3 identical princesses. The only difference was, before falling asleep, one had tasted sugar, another syrup, and the third one, honey. So there he was in the chamber, and he waited, and he breathed. And all of a sudden, the queen bee came in, and she started going to the lips of the different princesses, and she rested on the lips of the youngest, sweetest princess. And he said, "This is the princess." And at that moment, all of a sudden, the princesses woke up. Everyone in the castle, everything just woke up. And the horses and his brothers that were turned to stone came back to life. The spell had been broken. And Simpleton and the youngest daughter got married, and the brothers married the other princesses. And who knows if they lived happily ever after or not. I wasn't there to tell that part of the story. So that's the story of the Queen Bee, an ancient fairy tale that's in the collection of the Brothers Grimm.
And imagine I've heard other versions of that. So it's, almost like a universal story. Yeah. Beautiful.
And in terms of the symbology, well, I mean, obviously the animals, if we look after the animals, look after nature, nature will look after us. But also like being turned to stone. I mean, when you think a lot of things that are happening at the moment with climate change, a lot of people are like turned to stone. You can't feel it. Or sleeping.
Right.
And this sort of like, I mean, obviously, if we were here and I could see everyone, I would ask everyone where the story had touched them. Perhaps I would get them to draw a scene of the story. And in that scene of the story, perhaps walk into it, give the different symbols a voice, and then you would feel how that story is touching you. And they would touch people in lots of different ways. But at a symbolic level, it's, well, when I do sort of my psychodrama things, where it tends to lead us is into waking up the feminine energy. And I think it's quite good at this time of year because we're just, right next to the equinox. It's been, especially in Spain, like this very harsh masculine energy, not male and female, but the masculine energy. We've got masculine and feminine energy within us. I mean, it's just been so much sun and so much heat. And all of a sudden, we're going into the darker time of the year. And it's just waking up that so that we can look after nature.
Yes.
And that's where it takes me, that story.
Philippa says, I'm trying to show that. It's not happening. Yeah, honesty and kindness. You can now. Honesty and kindness towards nature and all life brings a gift of happiness. Yeah. And also about simplicity. You know, like it's simpleton.
And being
There's something
humble and
about,
being vulnerable.
you know,
He
sitting
sat
down
down
and
in the
crying.
snow and he cried.
Yeah.
Just
And I
being
think that
vulnerable. How many men let themselves be vulnerable? Because boys aren't meant to cry. That's the story that we're told, isn't it?
absolutely, and that he's a beautiful character. That soft, kind, sensitive, caring. That somehow he ends up being, in a sense, the hero, his own hero, because he's rescued as well. I mean, okay, it's all these helpers that help him wake up the princess. Gabriella says, it always feels weird to have stories when people marry right after meeting without knowing each other. I mean, that's always an interesting one. And they got married and they all lived happy ever after. I don't know.
I
Do you
got
have
married
anything
to my husband without hardly knowing him and without speaking Spanish, and he didn't speak English.
So no
So it does
arguments.
happen.
Well,
Yeah.
Howard and I got married very quickly after meeting. In a sense, we did know each other. Mimi says maybe they recognized each other from before. I think there's something.
Sorry, Eimear, I don't know if you're cutting out or I'm cutting out. So, Eimear, I'm not sure you're frozen or I'm frozen. I wonder if I should come back in. Mhm. Mhm. Well, I'll keep talking just in case it's Eimear that's not here. And I'll just check to see. And it's just in the story as well. It's there was no queen. There were no queen in either palace. So it's just in either castle. So it's just what happens when the feminine aspect is missing. And I know there's a lot of people would say this, like male and, female prince and princesses get married, but it's inside us. It's this kind of divine union. And it's when you're in balance. So your masculine and your feminine energy is balanced. And I think that's really, really important at this time well, it's always important, isn't it? But as I say, we're just coming up to the equinox. And I just think it's a nice story to talk about the importance of masculine and feminine energy. So it'd be nice to know if I'm the one that's out the picture or not. Let's see, I'll see if there's a message from Eimear. And yeah, I can't see any messages. Mhm. So I wonder if I should go out and come back in. Because I could tell more stories in the meantime. So how could I know if you're listening or not? Mhm. Okay, just leave me for a few seconds, okay? And I'll see if there's a message from Eimear somewhere. Okay. Okay, I get the feeling that there's some technical difficulties with Eimear, so I'll continue. Now, I wonder what you'd like to know. How I get into Druidry, I'll tell you about that. I think that's one of the questions that Eimear would ask. Well, I've always been really interested, especially in sacred circles, also in caves, in sort of like mystery places. And I started many years ago. I started doing things with Celtic reclaiming, but didn't quite find it was exactly what I wanted. I really did want it. I really wanted earth-based spirituality. Then I did some training with a wonderful person who became a really good friend of mine here, just near Madrid, where I live as well. And it was actually a training on the path of Mary Magdalene. And I thought, I really am earth-based. I'm not really into worshipping particular people, but I really liked this friend, and she was working with, the Wheel of the Year and crystals and essential oils. And so I joined the course, and I really did enjoy it. But that's when I really discovered that it was Druidry that was my path. And two big things happened. I was in a course, and we were doing a kind of visualization exercise to connect with our ancestors. And I had my eyes closed, and all of a sudden, this image came to me, and it was of a man dressed in brown, and I couldn't see his face. And I said, no, sorry, I have to connect with an ancestor, if you don't mind. And he didn't go away. And I felt he was protecting me, and I knew that I was in a forest. And I just thought, well, maybe he's meant to be there. And that really, I thought, well, perhaps, I've got some Druid blood in me. And I sort of started investigating. And then I was back in the training with the Mary Magdalene training. And we were sitting in a circle, and we were doing something really, in sacred space. And all of a sudden, one of the women in the circle said, can I tell you something? You said, I have this feeling that there's been a man by your side, like protecting you. And I said, well, what did he look like? And she said, well, he was all dressed in brown, and I couldn't see his face. And it was just the weirdest thing. And I just felt for some reason that that was an invitation to really go into the world of the Druids. And I started investigating. I found the Obod. It really fitted in. And I'm really happy with being part of the Obod, through storytelling, through everything that's there. I'll just check and see if there's a message from Eimear. And see what's happening. No. So I will keep talking. I know that one of the questions that Eimear normally asks as well is, do I have a particular practice? And a practice that I do have is that I really like getting up in the morning when it's dark, when everyone else is sleeping, and light a candle, open sacred space, and either with a smudge stick that I normally make my own smudge sticks, or some incense, just welcome in the 4 directions in the way that we do with the Druids. And then I do a little bit of yoga. And then with the yoga, I lie on the floor and connect with the earth under me and connect with my intentions for the day. And then basically just, close the circle and say thank you to the elements. I feel that the elements are really very valuable friends. Sometimes I need more fire, and because I'm lacking energy, so I'll spend more time with the fire energy. Sometimes I need to be more fluid, so I would invite in that water energy. And sometimes it's just more the air energy, and perhaps asking the air energy just to make me feel just that little bit lighter, help me with more loving, creative words. And definitely always the earth energy. And then after all this, I go for a long walk with my dog and really try to do that in a mindful way, listening to the different birds that just happen to be visiting, seeing what's happening to the trees. There are some lovely oak trees quite near where I live, and I always say, if anything happens to the oak trees, it will be time for me to go, because it's just a place that I feel very connected in. In terms of oak trees, which is very special to the Druids, we have like the sort of typical oak trees, with the shape of the oak leaves. And in this area of Spain, we have lots of holm oaks, and we have lots of cork oaks. And I feel that the cork oaks are very magical as well. And they do the most incredible, they really help us, they absorb so much carbon dioxide. I know all trees do, but cork oaks are really, really special. And I always have a little bit of cork on my altar, just to thank the cork oaks for being here. So I hope you can hear me as I keep talking. And let's see if there's any more words from... so Eimear can hear me on my phone, but not on my laptop. Okay. So I don't think Eimear will be able to come back in. So Eimear, should I close now? Would that be a good moment to close? Or I'm quite happy to keep talking or telling another story. Just if you just let me know through a message on the phone. And if we do have to close, then we can continue in a few weeks. So yeah, because there's so much that I would like to share. There really is. Just wait for one more message. And perhaps we started off this session talking about death. So perhaps I could tell you one of my favorite stories, and then we could finish there. One of my favorite stories about death. And then hopefully there'll be another session with Eimear, and we can talk about the other side of the coin, which is life. Just check one more time to see if there's another message from Eimear. And Okay. So I will tell you this story and then we'll finish if Eimear doesn't get back, okay? So for this story, I'm going to take you to my family home in Glasgow, in Scotland. And I lived there with my mum, my dad, my brother, my sister, and Muffin the rabbit. Now, Muffin was very special. He was the best rabbit ever. Big, fluffy, white, and rabbits get old, as we all do. And one day the vet said, "I'm sorry, but I think, Muffin's really sick and he probably won't get through the weekend." Now, I was really upset, but my brother John was devastated. And he ran out the house into a field nearby. He was crying. It's good to cry. We let him go. About 20 minutes later, John came back and he was really excited. His eyes were all really bright and shining. And I said, "John, what happened?" And he told me this story. Now, John had been walking in that field, and all of a sudden, a figure came to him. It was a man. Well, a long, tall man with black hat, a black suit. And he said, "Young man, can you tell me where 96 Loretto Street is?" That was our house, our address. And John said, "Who are you? And, who are you? And why do you want to know?" He said, "I'm Death and I'm in a hurry." And John said, "Death? Oh my goodness, Death? He's going for Muffin." But John, he was young, but he was really quick. And he started laughing and he said, "Really? Really? Death? If you're really Death, you could become so big you could fill the sky." And all of a sudden, the sky was black. And then grey. And John said, yeah, that happens all the time here. If you're really, really Death, you could become so small, you could fit in this bottle. And Death got into this bottle. And John closed the bottle with Death inside, came home and gave me, big sister, the bottle. I put it under the bed. We went into the living room and there was Muffin, our rabbit, jumping around. My mum had let him in that weekend because, it was cold and he was on his last legs, basically. John had saved Muffin's life. We were so happy. But Monday, my mum said, "Go down to the butcher's and get some sausages." I loved sausages then. Ran down, and the butcher was all red and huffing and puffing, and he said, "No, I can't give you sausages." "Oh, well, breast of chicken?" No, I've been trying to kill the chickens all day and they won't die." "Oh, steak?" No, the cows won't die either." "Okay then." Strange. I went home and my mum said, "Now that is very strange. Why don't you go into the vegetable garden and get some carrots and get some potatoes and we'll make soup?" But the carrots wouldn't come out the ground. The potatoes wouldn't come out the ground. And that night we had no dinner. The next night, no dinner. The next night, no dinner. And I don't know how, but my mum realised something was happening. And she said, "Jennifer, I think you understand what's happening." I confessed everything. "We can't go on like this. There's animals and people and, death is a part of life. They have to be let go." And actually, everything was disgusting. There was flies and fleas and everyone was scratching. And I got the bottle from under the bed. John took Muffin in his arms. He sat on the sofa. I went into the garden. And very slowly I began to open that bottle. And out came Death. He was really, really tall. And I still remember his words. He said, "Jennifer, I'm not angry with you, but please understand that death is not the enemy of life. Life and death are two sides of the same coin." I understood. He went to go into my house, and at that moment he said, "I'll see you someday." He went through the door. I waited a few seconds, it seemed like hours. And when I went in, there was John on the sofa with Muffin in his arms. And Muffin had a big smile of peace on his face. And Muffin was dead. And that's one of the stories that I've been telling at the Death Story cafes. So I think I'll sign off now and just have a candle here for our Druid members who have passed away and for everyone else in the world who's suffering, for the animals, for Muffin. I'll bid you all farewell, and I hope to see you very soon with Eimear to talk about the other side of the coin. Ahava and Awen. Bye-bye.